house and basketball and hockey and even a little bit of journalism being done on the baseball side. Ken Rosenthal's piece on Brady Anderson has shaken the tree of all of my media friendships and all of my friends who sometimes walk into press boxes and wave to me as I'm on the outside waiting to get back into an Oriole press box. Tom Lavero is one of those guys who's probably persona non grata up here on the north side of the Beltway, but for many, many years tangled with the Orioles and the Redskins and then the Ravens and the Redskins and the Capitals. I see him all over the place, Terps games. He has a podcast called Cigars and Curveballs on iTunes. He's a longtime columnist at the Washington Times, 106.7 The Fan contributor. And I did not know this, but I always am educated by him. He is a Georgetown University adjunct professor. I want to be one of those one day. Tom Lavero joins us live via satellite from his palatial estate somewhere in the DMV to discuss bad ownership. Dude, we're like the epicenter of bad ownership, right? I mean, maybe the Bay Area with the 49ers and but the ownership around here between the Orioles and the Redskins, it's kept us on our toes the last quarter of a century, hasn't it, Tom?
Oh, I mean, the one thing that binds Baltimore and Washington sports fans together, their one connection is bad ownership. And I think the only thing they debate is who's worse, Peter Angelos or Daniel Snyder.
Well, you've been on both sides of this thing, so you tell me. You're obviously familiar with the Brady Anderson piece. You sat 5 feet away from Ken Rosenthal for probably the better part of 20 years, in various places, as did I. I was his assistant at the Sun in the 80s. I knew Brady Anderson very well, as I know you did, traversing those locker rooms back in the 90s before Mr. Angelos allowed Washington to have a team so generously to the tune of a $3 billion, profiteering off of all of that. But the Brady Anderson thing really is sort of par for how dysfunctional places run. And when places are run in a dysfunctional fashion, sometimes they can win and sometimes they can be deodorized or sanitized for a little while. But in the end, as everyone on the south side of the Beltway learned with the Redskins, that, the fish always stinks from the head, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes an organization like the Orioles and the Redskins, they will accidentally fall into success through a variety of circumstances. The Orioles, in particular, have had a string of success because of Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette, but in particular, Buck, I think, has been instrumental in that.
I think Andy MacPhail was instrumental. Isn't it funny you'd say that? I think the deals that Andy MacPhail set up and Buck finding that and having that, and Machado and and Wieters panning out to some degree, getting on the field. I give Andy MacPhail a lot of credit. I really do. If I were starting the book, I would start it with Andy MacPhail getting Adam Jones.
That's a good point. You're absolutely right. The Adam Jones trade was huge, one of the main building blocks for what has happened. But the big issue in bringing success to the Orioles, no matter how many good deals you make, is managing the owner. Buck has been able to do that. And, I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Even when he sends Brady Anderson in and Brady Anderson's living with Mike Wright and telling him to change his delivery, all of that has to be okay if you take the gig. And the one thing that Dan Duquette learned, once you're in the family, you're never allowed to leave, right? I mean, he was literally, it's like being in Russia or being in Cuba. He knows he's here, he's trapped here through the end of 18. I find it fascinating that what Andy MacPhail or Buck Showalter or Dan Duquette would say 10 years from now about what it was like to work in the... I know what Frank Wren said about it. I know what Mike Flanagan. I know exactly how Mike Flanagan felt about it. And we've heard all of the. But Brady Anderson coming in, not answering the Buck and not answering the Dan Duquette. If you're Dan or you're Buck and your checks cashing every 2 weeks, you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, you do. And in terms of dysfunction, in terms of ownership meddling, it's kind of low on the totem pole from what we've seen. And part of what doesn't make it as debilitating as it may be is, look, I know Brady, and I think Brady is an honest guy. And I think that, part of what makes
Can you work for Peter Angelos and be an honest guy? I mean, I'm just challenging that. I mean, as the journalist who had my press credentials revoked and who was lied to for 15 years until that happened, is that possible, Tom? To be an honest guy, that's like saying Sean Spicer's an honest guy. I mean, I just, it's. I don't think you're allowed to be an honest guy when you work for a dishonorable person who, when you work for him, you not only keep his secrets, you keep his lies. And his lies are held to you as well, I think.
Well, my dealings with Brady have always been pretty upfront and honest. And I'm sure, I think, I don't know, but I think that's probably how he deals with Buck. I think if there was anyone else in that role, I think it could be a lot worse. Now, granted, Buck, I'm sure Brady doesn't see Peter Angelos. In his own mind, maybe he's rationalized that what we see as abuse is not abuse. Let's face it. You've got to rationalize a lot in order to work for a guy like Peter Angelos. And I'm sure Brady has probably done that. But my point would be that situation, which when you have a guy directly connected to the owner in the clubhouse, it's not healthy. Because people worry about what they're going to say, people worry about what they're going to do, and if it's going to get back to the owner. And
I think Wieters pointed that out, Arrieta pointed that out in the piece, but Adam Jones is not allowed to point that out until he goes and plays for the Phillies. That's just the way this works, right? Brady stands above all of them, including Duquette and Buck. Duquette, I feel like he probably thinks he's unfireable because the old man wouldn't pay him if there's some insubordination. I have to think that if this piece showed up on the old man's desk and the old man sat and read what first off, he hates Rosenthal. Let's start with that. And the fact that Rosenthal wrote it would piss off the old man. But why did this piece get written, Tom? I had Marty Conway on earlier, and I know we share a mutual friendship and an incredible respect for Marty. Marty's first question is, who thought this was a good idea to talk to Ken Rosenthal? And Ken Rosenthal sniffing around, probably based on Wallace and Chidi and others saying, that place over there, I know they're winning, but it's still a little screwed up. And I think guys like you and I who've been around it, I know it's screwed up every opening day when I don't get my press credential. That's when I know it's still screwed up. So, that's my proof. But the proof is in the pudding in this story as to it's kind of screwed up. This is a bad time for it to be screwed up too, right? If there's a power play to be made here, it's for Brady Anderson to say, I'm good at all of this, I'm qualified. That's, I guess, his role in this is saying, I know I've been maligned, I know I'm the village snitch or perceived as such, but I'm good at what I do, and I see the game differently, and I played the game at a higher level, and I aspire to be an executive. If that's why the story got written, I don't think that Brady and Rosenthal are that close, but this isn't a good look for anybody. It's a good look for Ken Rosenthal because he's the only one doing journalism in Baltimore these days.
Well, listen, again, with a dysfunctional organization, you have to measure the level of problems. And this, Brady being the meddlesome factor in this organization, pales in comparison to what they've had to deal with in the past.
Fair enough.
On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the two sons, Lou and John, telling the owner who to sign in free agency over to general manager, Brady meddling or having a role is like a 4. Really.
You were around for all of that, and it feels like it's been forgotten.
Nestor, if you get used to a certain level of dysfunction and poison, let's say, because sometimes it really is poison, and then it lessens a little bit, it doesn't feel as bad. So I think that the whole Brady role thing, I think, falls into that category. For a lot of other teams, it would be very bizarre. For the Orioles, it's not quite as bad as business as usual. And one of the reasons I think Brady, again, talked to Ken Rosenthal is what I said before. I think Brady's pretty honest. He may rationalize working for Peter Angelos.
But he's also kind of unfireable.
Yes, he is. Well, I mean, I don't
Well,
know
I mean,
about
that's
that.
that. Well, I mean, he's best friends with the owner's son. By the way, where's Peter? Where's Peter Angelos, Tom, in all of this?
I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
I know you're
I'm
following
sure.
the Masson money story up in New York, and I mean, we are arguing about $350 million now, right, between these two organizations. It's Machado money. It's Bryce. Win the battle, and you have enough to sign Machado. Not that Angelos would ever do that. That money's going to go in his pocket. Machado's going to go off to the Phillies or the Yankees or whatever. But it would be a great excuse if Lerner comes up and beats him up over $275 million, and the Orioles, not the Orioles, the old man has to stroke a check for $275 million to Lerner for all the money he's been beating him out of for the last 8 years. That if that literally happens, then there's the built-in excuse to not sign Machado, right? So, but at some point, this is going to come to a head, and this money thing is going to get decided, and I think that's going to tower over all of this. I think, behind closed doors, they don't care about Chris Tillman starting or not. Behind closed doors, there's a lot of money sitting on the table here. It's a big cash grab, man.
Yeah, and this is what I don't understand, though, Nestor. How much money are we talking about? Are we talking about the money from Masson 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, or are we talking about Masson money today? Because I'm willing to bet that the revenue that Masson brings in today is significantly less than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, it is for ESPN and for every other network. I mean, that's the cable cord cutting going on everywhere. It is a depreciating. I mean, they've driven this thing to the end of the road, and no one is more happy that Masson never really became a real network with a news department and all of that sort of stuff than John. I mean, they've just pocketed all of this money, and they might get away with it. I mean, but in the end, they might not have to write Lerner any check. I mean, Lerner signed a bad deal. He came in on a bad deal, but the market changed, and the revenue should have changed as well. I see the gray area in this, and I also see how much money that they're. I mean, look, the old man fought with Frank Wren over $100,000 or whatever, right? I mean, and went to the end of the earth with, Xavier Hernandez 20 years ago. So we're talking about $400 million here. They're going to fight and they're going to claw it all out. I mean, behind all of this is that, and where is the old man? Where is he? Because he stands behind all of this, but no one ever finds him, right?
Nestor, when Major League Baseball made this deal to move the Expos to Washington and created the Masson Network to appease Peter Angelos, I am convinced, and I've been told by people inside the business that this is true, that when this came around again, when it came time to open up the agreement to renegotiate it, they didn't think they'd be talking to Peter Angelos.
Well, they believed Fox was going to buy it, or they were going to. The network.
That's not what I'm talking, Nestor.
I understand
that's not what I'm talking about.
You thought about his birth certificate. I understand. So,
yes.
Well,
I'm serious. This is what they thought. They thought that he would not be around.
Well, it's 12 years later.
When they had to renegotiate this.
Okay, I mean, that's one way of looking at it if you're them, but they were wrong, and it's going to cost them money, and it's certainly, look, I don't know if it's going to cost them money. In the end, the New York Supreme Court may say, Angelos has $300 million sitting on his side of the fence that belongs to Mr. Lerner, write the check. You've been holding this money in escrow, write him, that could absolutely happen.
Yes, it could.
Yeah, I don't know what happens to the organization here at that point. At some point, he's not going to be here, and the question is whether the boys are going to run the team or not. I tend to think of this Rosenthal story, and again, I'm 48 hours, 72. I've changed my mind on it a bunch of times. I think Brady Anderson's trying to set up to be the GM, right? I mean, like, the long-term play here is 18 months, blink, Dan Duquette's gone. There's no thought that Dan Duquette's going to hang around here if he has an escape hole to go anywhere else. And certainly Buck has made, has buttered his bread in a way that he might get a real job, a good job somewhere. The Cardinals might want him, or there'll be 15 organizations that would want Buck Showalter to come manage for them 2 years from now and be willing to pay them a lot of money. It's going to be and Machado's going to be gone, right? So a lot of things could really go wrong for Mr. Angelos here over the next 2 years.
I was told by somebody who I think is one of the more powerful people in baseball that Major League Baseball will never let the Suns own the team. They will never let that happen. I don't know how that's going to happen, but
well, estate
he seemed
taxes
pretty
and all of that,
confident
yeah.
about that.
Well, yeah, estate taxes, and if Peter dies, probably his wife owns the team. We've seen all of that go on in sports ownership, and I've created a long history on all that.
This is particularly about them. They will not let them own the team. It has nothing to do with estate tax or anything. I mean, and I don't know how they're going to do it, but baseball would not put up with them as owners of the team. Because I think if Peter Angelos dies, everything gets sold.
He is Tom Lavero. He does all things Washington sports, but has been in the corridor for years, covering the Orioles, the Terps, and everything else. Podcast is Cigars and Curveballs, and that's out on iTunes. And, of course, you can follow him out on Twitter, and tens of thousands do, as well as his column at the Washington Times. You've written about the Orioles and the ownership here. I hadn't even begun the Redskin thing, and I've been talking about that the last couple of weeks. What are the parallels you see, Tom, between both of these? Because, I've bumped into Dan Snyder a dozen times. I'll see him this weekend, or maybe not, at the owners' meetings out in Phoenix. And the stories are legendary there. But this McLuhan thing is, it's kind of got the industry up in arms again to say, what's going on over there? I mean, what kind of place are you running out there, Dan?
Well, I mean, ego is involved. People don't realize. People figure, well, these are smart businessmen who became multimillionaires. They didn't become multimillionaires by being stupid, people will say. And that may be the case, but when it comes to sports ownership, people would be amazed at how many decisions are made based on ego and personal vendettas and stuff that the basic question an owner should always ask themselves is, what's the best thing for the franchise? That question I don't think ever gets asked in Baltimore and Washington.
Well, the Ravens have been
with the Orioles and the Redskins.
And but then you see and you get to contrast here in Baltimore what the Ravens have become over 22 years and what the Orioles have become. And the Redskins, no matter what, the Redskins own. They own Washington. I mean, I think we found that out 2 weeks ago. I mean, the Wizards went to the West Coast and couldn't lose. The Capitals, on fire before they got to the West Coast. It all kind of happened at the same time when the Big Ten showed up. But the Terps play this incredible, game on a Friday night and pack the place down in D.C. and then fall on their faces. But the big story is Scott McLuhan drinking again, And is Dan Snyder still crazy? And who's running the place over there? And the quarterback doesn't want to be on the team and tells the owner, trade me. And then it leaks out that McLuhan wanted to trade Cousins. And there's all sorts of weirdness going on there. But the shroud of secrecy and the mistrust of the owner is really sort of endemic in both of these franchises, right? I mean, to be around them is to lie for them, and to be honest is to be left out, I think.
Well, to some extent, yeah. I mean, I always say the Redskins have this aura of self-destruction that surrounds them, that even if they happen to come on something good, they will figure out a way to mess it up. I mean, they are a self-destructive organization run by an owner who tends to be that way. But the interesting thing about the Redskins and the Ravens is the Redskins right now are looking at a location for a new stadium. And the running is between D.C., Maryland, and Northern Virginia. And a lot of people think they're going to wind up putting the stadium in Northern Virginia, where they already train, where they have their training camp, they have their headquarters. My contention is if they put that stadium in Virginia, they might as well raise the white flag in Maryland because they will lose a huge amount of their fan base in Maryland. Because we know the Ravens have been very aggressive about marketing and fighting that fight for fans in Anne Arundel, Howard, and even Montgomery and PG County. I think if the Redskins leave Maryland or D.C., they'll lose those fans because for decades, Virginia fans have been used to making the trip over to D.C. or Maryland to see the team. It has not been the other way around. Now you're going to ask these Maryland fans, some of whom who are probably looking for a reason to bail on the Redskins, to make the drive over to Virginia on Sundays to see this team play. I say that I think I think it's going to wind up in Maryland, but if it does in Virginia, I think you're going to see the Ravens make a big push for those Redskins fans in suburban Washington.
Tom, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everyone that covers the Wizards and the Capitals. I've been asking this a lot the last week or two. Capitals, are they going to win the Stanley Cup, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Wizards, are they going to get to the Eastern Conference Finals?
No.
Wow, you're killing my spring, man. I mean, what the hell am I going to do in late May? Come on, man. What are we going to watch the Orioles and the Nationals? Come on, man.
Hey, arena football, baby.
That's right.
Washington and Baltimore.
I got the brigade going on. All right, there. Fair enough. I'll be doing some arena football. We'll be following you out there, of course, as always, at Tom Lavero out on Twitter. And I know you do a great podcast, Cigars and Curveballs. Anytime you want me on, I'll do the curveballs. I don't do cigars, but I mean, I'll do cocktails. I'll do martinis,
Okay, Nestor.
Be well. Great having you on, Tom.
Thanks a lot.
Tommy Love, there he goes. Tom Lavero of the Washington Times and Georgetown University adjunct professor. I mean, hopefully we got educated in that segment. That is the goal around here, is to educate, inspire, and lead or something like that. Nasty at WNST.net's the way to find me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am headed out to Arizona this weekend for some Cactus baseball, checking out Sloan Park as well as the NFL owners meeting. So we'll have breakfast with John Harbaugh on Monday. We'll be checking that out. Make sure you're out on my social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I'll have some of that stuff coming your way as well next week. Should be a good week out there. Hopefully get some sun, come back, and we'll get opening day underway. We'll have a Final Four at the end of this weekend. And if you missed our lengthy chat with head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Capitals on Monday night at Greenmount Station. All for There Goes My Hero and the Bone Marrow Registry. You can find it out in the YouTube catalog at WNSTV. You can find it on my Facebook Live page as well as in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault. That's there for you 24 hours a day so you can listen to anything you miss around here. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.